Hello students, today we will study about the environment and natural resources. So in this unit we will explore about the environmental concern and the protection movement that was started for the environmental cause, and in this unit we will explore about the Kyoto protocol, what is Kyoto, and the common but definition responsibility is what, and what is the India's stand on the environmental issue. So all these things we are going to study today. So you all know what is environment and natural resources. So with the climatical change or with the global warming increase, there is a lot of challenge started on the different front against the environment. So these issues led to the lot of cooperation and the convention between the different countries, because this environmental cause or the global warming issue not a specific issue of one country, whole world affected by it. So what is environmental concern, and it's led a lot of global concern or a environmental concern in a global politics. So it's a lot of new issue or various new stage emerge for that matter. So what is an environmental concern? Because with the climate change or a global warming, a lot of things were started changing, like land degradation or desertification of land was started. Even you see the example of expansion of Sahel region in Africa, and agriculture land productivity losing its fertility rate, and groundwater was depleting, its level was depleting, ozone hole expansion. So all these issues were a environmental concern that was started at the time period. So a lot of challenge, and it's these issues led to the impact on human in the every corner of world, because this losing of agriculture fertility also created a food scarcity, and depletion of water level created a drinking water issue in a lot of front. Even UNDP report of United Nations, a report on the HDR Human Development Report said that 1.2 billion people in developing countries have no access to safe water. So this facts told us about telling us about the issue of the drinking or the safe water. So what is the safe water? Safe water means there's no impurity found in the water, and there was no health issues will it lead to if we consume that water. So there was no safe water for 1.2 billion people in the developing country. So all this concern or all these issue of land, water and polluted air leads to the international convention, or we can say a environmental convention. So the first thing in the environmental convention was the Club of Rome, one organization published a book in 1972 entitled with the limits to growth. So in this limits to growth, it's talk about the resource depletion with the how with the industrialization a lot of things were changing, and how it's affecting the global environment. So there it's talking about the limits to growth. So with the growth or with the lot of industrial development, what are the issues that it's letting in the environmental concern. So this was the first thing that was started, and later on then United Nations Environmental Program, a specific body of UN for the environmental cause, began to hold different conference. COP, Conference of Party, was one of the very famous convention or conference used to happen every year on the different country, like Azerbaijan COP was happened. So that's how these countries trying to talk about the environmental challenge or all these issues I listed you in front of you. So these are the things started happening. And United Nations Conference on Environmental and the Development, when it first led, the United Nations Concern for Environmental Development firstly held in Rio de Janeiro in 1992. So from that place in 1992, even this tradition today is continue environmental for the environmental conferences. So in 1992 it's called as Earth Summit or a Rio Summit. So this 1992 summit of Rio called Earth Summit event. So other name is called Rio Summit, and it's recommended a lot of new suggestion and a lot of new principle for the safeguarding of environment. And the one is called Agenda 21. So what is Agenda 21? In Agenda 21, a list was given for the environmental cause. In this Agenda 21, what we need to do, how should we can safeguard our environment. So all these things were given, what we need to achieve in the upcoming future. So these all things came in this Agenda 21. And later on, one another example of environmental convention was in 1987, Brundtland report, Our Common Future, warns about the sustainability issue. So what given in this Brundtland report, it's talk about if we are not going to be sustainable in near futures or near upcoming years, so a lot of sustainability issue will be created, and it's also let a lot of concern of the human health, or not only human health but the flora and fauna are going to be affected with these issues. So these are the things that starting of the environmental concern, or we can say environmental convention at the time. Now let's come to the next slide. The protection of global common. So what does it means? It means that some of the things common for the whole world. It's not controlling the one country or one regional territory, one country's territory. It's common for all. Like ocean, there is no control beyond the EEZ role, exclusive economic zone. There was no control of one country over a ocean. So for the ocean security, because ocean one of the very pivotal for the, not only for the our own self, but also for the climatical regulation, for the food security, and a lot of life are supported inside these ocean. So for the environment, for that matter, ocean was a very important role to play for all these monsoon cycle. All these things were covered under the, or all these things regulated by this ocean. So with the that's how we need the protection of this ocean firstly. And the second very important is Antarctica. What is Antarctica? Antarctica, a very vast continent, a very unique ecosystem. So, and it's not come under the one own community. It's governed by the international community called res communis humanitals, or a global common, because there was no one such governmental control or one country flag was there. So these are the area where we need a cooperation between the countries, or we need a international effort for the conservation of these area. And the third one is atmosphere. It's also impacts like a lot of with the industrialization, a lot of greenhouses gases was emerging, leading to the climate change, like issue of carbon dioxide increase, or the methane gas, or other ozone layer in the terrestrial region. So all these things are creating a lot of environmental issue. So these common global, like ocean, Antarctica region, or the atmosphere, so this not affecting one country or one region, but the whole world going to be affected by the any degradation or any instability in this region. So these all things needed to be commonly protected by the every country, or effect should be ensured by the every country for the betterment of these common areas. So that's why it's called the protection of global commons. And the next is Antarctica. Antarctica is also called a global common. What is the issue of Antarctica? In Antarctica, environmental concern, because with the rising of temperature, and this Antarctica has a very unique, we can say a very unique territorial area. It's spread across the 14 million square kilometer, and it's had a 26% of area, and 90% its territory covered with ice. So with the increasing of global warming, a lot of ice shelf are breaking, and ice melt melting was started happening. So these ice melting leads to the increase of sea level. So this also create one of the very rising issue in the environmental concern. So what we need for that matter, we need to safeguard it, we need to look it for the protection of this area. And these Antarctica region have a high productive marine life, so these need to be protected by the by the different countries. And these Antarctica region, we also say that one of the very high carbon storage region. So with the melting of ice, a lot of new climatical change, of we can say a lot of new changes we can see, a lot, maybe some of the new epidemic will also came with this melting of ices. So these things led to the lot of new cycle of issues and new cyclicity of problem in the international arena. So these things we need to look into, and we need to safeguard for it, and we need to check on the its safety. Even though Antarctica come under the common control, but a lot of countries like United Kingdom, Argentina, Chile, Norway claim over there these region. But most of the states say that it's a common global, not a subjective jurisdiction of any country. So these are the issue. And even research or fishing tourism was allowed there, but only limited activities allowed, because this area was very sensitive, and for that matter we need to look for its safeguard. So these are the issue. Pollution issue I also already told you, and diversity, because with the it's had a unique biodiversity. But this invasive species, I hope you know what is invasive species. Invasive species is some species that not belong to that native place, and with the coming of these invasive species, they try to replace the native species. So this that's how these invasive species also can change the flora and fauna of the any state or any region. So these are the common issue in the Antarctica environmental concern. So for all these matter, a lot of convention was also signed for its safeguard. Like 1959 Antarctica Treaty was happened. Later on 1987 Montreal Protocol for also safeguarding its indirectly, and 1991 Antarctic environmental preference. So all these laws or all these acts for the safeguard of this region. And one is the very important issue is ozone hole in Antarctica. You all heard before how this ozone hole impacting and leads to coming of the allow the coming of the UV rays, ultraviolet rays, and leads to the skin cancer and a lot of different issues. Now with the efforts of the different platform, effects of the different country, we are trying to limits the expansion of ozone hole in Antarctica. So with the because with the we try to stop the use of chlorofluoro gases or the other poisonous gases that led for the expansion of these holes. So that's how we try to safeguard our environment or our unique territory like Antarctica region, because any expansion or any change with these Antarctica not going to affect one area, it affects the whole economics, whole ecosystem of the country or whole ecosystem of the world. So these are the thing in that. Now let's come to the next slide about common but differentiated responsibility. So what does it mean, CBDR in short form it called? So there was a lot of issue of environmental concern with the industrialization. A lot of countries participated in it for their production or for their capitalist greed. Environmental concern was not taken care of, but the rising of environmental issues starting about talking about the starts the talk of CBDR. So what does it means? It means the historical responsibility. So firstly, a new talk was started that there was two sort of country. One is categorized as developed country, and second is called as developing country. So developed country who has a industrialization, witness industrialization in their country. So they had a a lot of resources, a lot of infrastructure, so they are called as developed country. On other hand, developing countries, those countries which are under colonization or not witness or go through with the industrialization process. So this created a division between this country. So now this thing came that only those countries who led to the who are the reason for this environmental issue, or for the who are the responsible for the global warming. So now we need a more responsibility they needs to take for this environmental concern. They needs to fund for the environmental concern. They need to limits on their limits their industrial production, or go for the green friendly or environmental friendly method for the production. So that's what it's talk about the common but differentiated responsibility. Because as see for the example of India, we never go with the industrialization process. So in the India, the limits, or we had some liberty for the industrialization, because India had on a back front, or India had not gone with this industrialization process. On the other hand, USA, America was gone with this industrialization process. So more responsibility of fundraising, or more responsibility, or more limits on their emission of greenhouse gases, or the other things were imposed on the USA compared to the India. So this is all about the historical responsibility. So when this is started, these concern was, or these topics were started after the 1992 Earth Summit, or called Rio Summit. After 1992 of UNFC Summit, we started talking about all these things. And what is Kyoto Protocol? Now the next thing is Kyoto Protocol. So after the 1992 UNFC CBDR, Common but Differentiated Responsibility, Kyoto Protocol was signed after the after 5 year 1997. That Kyoto is in Japan, so that's why it's called, it's happened in Japan. It's called Kyoto Protocol. So in this international agreement, which sets different target for the India's industrial country to cuts out this emission. So this also we can say a continuation of CBDR, where the emission targets were set for the different countries. For the industrial countries, and the for like USA, UK, so they had to cut down the emission of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, methane gases, and other HFC, CFC. So all these they need to cut it down. And for the developing countries like India and China, we had a different setting targets. So this is what Kyoto Protocol. We set a emission target for the different countries. And now the third thing is shared responsibility. So what does it means? So even though some of the developed country like US, China was responsible for the for this global or climate change issue, but it doesn't mean only these country had to solve the issue. Even India contributed a lot in that matter, or China also trying to do it in its front. So so a lot of shared responsibility between not only developed country, but also developing countries coming together, or small island country mostly affected by this environmental issue. Because with the rising of sea level, these island, or these island countries going to be submerged in the water and can convert into water bodies. So there we need a shared responsibility between the all country that are in the world, to came together on one platform, or on a one common conclusion for the safeguard of environment. So these are the major concern at that time. Now let's come to the next thing, the common property resources. So what is common property resources? Common property resources means like ocean, as I told you earlier also, or forest, or air, or fresh water, we can say. So all these things commonly used by everyone. There was no restriction on their uses. Even though now with the for the betterment of the society, we try to conserve our forest. You cannot cut down a green tree. So all these things just for its safeguard, nothing else. So this is how we come on a we try to safeguard these things. First is ocean. You know how ocean is very important. A lot of issue in ocean was started, like overfishing issue, or polluted water was draining into the river that went to the sea. So all these things led a lot of cyclicity, a lot of even death trail of fishes was seen in the ocean. So why these things started happening? These all things was happening because of this environmental degradation or for ocean pollution. And the second thing is the forest. For how the role of forest or a green tree is important for our biodiversity, because forests let's sustain a lot of not only animal, it's provide food, other material, or a lot of oxygen production. So a lot of things like deforestation, even in for you can see the example of India, like during the colonial period for the railway construction, a lot of timber tree was cutted down. So these things, and even a lot of introduction of new trees was happened by the Britishers. So a lot of new environmental change was started, and environmental degradation, even we see it as an environmental imperialism by Britishers, like forests were cutting down for the making railway coaches, or for the making railway trails at that time. So this is how India witnessed a lot of issue in the forest degradation. Even after the decolonization, even in people in the country was not very sensitive for these environmental concern. So this also created a lot of issue in the environmental front. Or we say we had no such much knowledge that how these things, small things, or these small unawareness can lead to one global issue of climate change. So these are the things that started at the time. And later on this, what is freshwater issue. So with the events today, we see the how our water table was depleting, and groundwater was depleting, a lot of scarcity of drinking water, safe water, because the water has a lot of arsenic in that, a lot of other pollutant in the drinking water, a lot of health issue was starting with it. So these also led to a issue of fresh water uh, in the whole over the world. Even some of the countries in Africa, like Somalia, has an issue of drinking water. So these are the things were started. UNHDR, yeah, we say HDR report clearly mentions that 1.2 billion people in developing country had an issue of safe drinking water. So these all facts and data was telling us about the issue, these issues. So first we and the next thing is come in our mind, who is responsible for the safeguarding is this issue. So because all these things were controlled by state, so the government control these, or we can say own these common property. So the most of the rules, law and regulation were framed by the government. So with these law, a lot of restriction was imposed by the commoners or the civilian people again for the safeguard. So these all things led to the a lot of law, like Air Protection Act, or NGT was created in India. We can see the example of India. So a lot of new changes, a lot of new law was created for the environmental concern or our common property. But without the cooperation of the native people, we cannot sustain, or without the cooperation of the commoners or masses, we cannot implement these law. So a lot of cooperation or willingness also needed from the people for these environmental cause. So this is all about common property resources. Now let's come to the next topic, India's stand on environmental issue. So what is India's stand? As you all know, India is a developing country, and India also faced the issue of environmental concern. You see how during the winter season, a lot of smoke started coming after the Diwali in Delhi area and CR region. Air pollution was very increasing, on increasing front. Red alert was started in many states. So what does it indicate? It indicates that we need more things to be done for the environmental cause. But although India, since the issue was emerged, India was a very cooperative, and India tried to implement a lot of reform for its environmental concern, even although India has a limits of the resources, because India also had to deal with the other issue of poverty, malnutrition. So that's why India had not, being a developing country, India has not that much resources for that matter. But India always tried to be in forefront and try to become as a leader in the South Asian country when it's come to the environmental issues. So what are the steps taken by India? First we need to understand that. So the first is the renewable energy. You know how the solar plants were important. A lot of solar plants and wind power was trying to be implemented, so that energy resources or conventional energy resources like diesel or diesel petrol should be replaced with these other things. So we try to even a lot of sarkari yojana, or we say the governmental schemes were also for that, like our prime minister tried to promote this renewable energy through the solar panel or solar plant. So this is how India tried to replace with this renewable energy, or we can say environmental friendly energy for the environmental cause. And not only in that, there was a lot of national law, or nation law was also formulated for the better implementation for this policy. Like already India had a national fuel policy, the Energy Conservation Act of 2001 were formulated, Electricity Act of 2003, National Mission on Biodiesel. These are the some of the efforts from the India front. With this biodiesel mission, we try to replace diesel with some environmental friendly things like ethanol mixing, and all these things were started. With the Electricity Conservation Act, we try to limit the use of electricity. So all these were the efforts taken by the India government for its safeguards. Even today we see a lot of new things like organic farming were started, so that so that environmental degradation or marine security can be assured by these things. So organic farming, giving up over the HYV seeds, like high yielding variety seeds, with the organic farming or natural farming we started doing. So with these, why we are taking this step, we try to replace or we are going towards the sustainable future where we are not going to be uh, take things which are not sustainable in long run, or which cause the environmental degradation in the human life. So all these things were started. On the international front also, India was actively participated on the environmental agreement or environmental issue. Although India had not that much resources, India tried to push other countries for coming together actively on the different front. Like 1997 Kyoto Protocol, later on India signed it in 2022. So these are the even this reflects the India's leadership in environmental concern. United Nation conference on the climate change, where also India was very actively participating, or in every parties of conference of parties that happened in the different countries. So India was participated in that matter, or try to replace its traditional method of energy consumption or the forest pattern with a lot of new laws. So these all the law that Indian government had come up with for the environmental issue. So these are the India's issue on the environmental front. Now let's come to the next slide. The environmental movement, one or many. So it's led to a lot of global movement, a lot of regional movement, because this environmental concern is not for one. So different platforms start with the different movement. Like global movement, we all know that different countries like Mexico, Chile, in India faced a lot of enormous pressure, a lot of sustainable issue was there. So they started a lot of global movement for the safeguard of their environment, and a lot of regional and local movement was also started, because a lot of state are also dealing with these issues. Like in Australia, because Australia is one of the very important important resource for the metal or mining. So mining issue was also there, because India is some of the top exporter in some of the important metal. So this also mining also led to a lot of environmental concern, like multinational companies, Western Mining Corporation. based on Western mining corporation. So all these are also creating a lot of environmental degradation. So this led to a lot of widespread protest against these or MNCs. Anti-dam issue to save the Franklin River in Australia. Some of the example of regional issue. Even in India, we studied about the Chipko movement against the forest department. So this Chipko movement also talks about the regional and local movement in different countries. So in India, that movement was started uh, against the environmental concern. And the third one is the indigenous voices. What does it means? Because the indigenous, some of the indigenous people, some of the tribes in India, also in the world also, because they mostly live in forest and they had a strong faith in environmental concern. Even some of the communities India, for example Vishnoi community, they had a very strong relation with the environmental ecosystem. They had a very prominent relation with the black buck deer. So this is what this show the a lot of environmental faith in the indigenous community in India also. Those tribals people who lives in a forest also, they had forest seen as their homes. So they try to, what they try to do, they try to safeguard, because it's their home. It's not where they used to go for 1 hour or 2 hours. So they try to safeguard this forest or the forest flora and fauna, because it's provide not only home shelter but also food to the tribal people. So these all things were started with the environmental change. These people's life were also affected. So they also started a lot of protests against this issue. So these are about the indigenous voice, how these indigenous voices started. And later on in India we see the forest conservation act of 2006 when it came being. So it's also tried to take care of this indigenous community. So these are the things, and these are the movement on the local front or regional front or the global, let's do the global movement. So all these are things started after that. Now let's come to the next slide. The resource geopolitics. The first one is energy. You know the how energy demand were very high, like oil, gas, and other energy resources. So this also created a lot of geopolitical tension. You know the how Gulf region had the account of 30% global oil production. This led to a lot of, like, Gulf War was happened, Iraq invasion of Kuwait, and US intervention in all these area. These all also created a lot of geopolitical issue in the international front, because energy was a demand at that time. Everyone wants to control over the oil fields. So these are the one issue that was created at the time. And the second one is minerals, because for the technological development a lot of minerals were needed. Today we talks about the rare earth metal, or like we talks about the thorium, because India has a vast resource over. India has a vast quantity of its. So a lot of rare earth metal demand were increasing, and China was one of the major exporter of these things. So because why it is important, because these rare earth metal or thorium or uranium, these important metals, these important things contributes a lot of developments in and they needs in defense technology. So these resources are very rare, or very not very rare. These resources are very important these days. So this also try to create a new types of geopolitics. And the third thing is fresh water. So you all know how the fresh water is very important, and how the water become a new conflict between the different territories. Everyone wanted to had a control over the freshwater bodies. So it's led a lot of tension in internal and the external front between the countries. It also sometimes leads to the violence between the countries, like Israel, Jordan, and Syria in 1950s had control over the water bodies issue started. And even in India you see the how India had an issue over the Bangladesh over the Brahmaputra Ganga river issue. Even India and Pakistan had an issue over water bodies, like Indus water body issue. Even today we are not totally solved these issues, still continuing with this issue. Like we both try to blame each other over the water conflicts. So all these things, a lot of conflict, a lot of affects their international relation in the geopolitics. Even somehow they try to, these resources shapes the relation between the different countries and different fronts. So this is how the environmental degradation not only impacts some of the key community, but the whole ecosystem who are the part of it. So that's how these environmental concern and these national resources, natural resources, impacts everywhere, and they also somehow shapes the geopolitics of the different countries. So this is all things that started and impacts the whole world. Now let's come to the next slide, the indigenous people and their rights. So these indigenous personalities, like indigenous people who lives to the who called native to these places, they mostly live in the forest area or like tribals, etc. So what they tried, they had very strong connection with their land. So a lot of challenge were started with the land right issue also, because with the development, a lot of new development, sometimes led to the replacement of these people, like for the mining in different region, like in, for example of India, for Bhilai region, when the mining of the iron ores or started, metal, iron ore or other metal was started. So a lot of replacement of these displacement of these tribal people or indigenous people was started. So it's led a lot of protests against this. Even we see the example of and Sardar Sarovar Dam when it started happening. So a lot of regional protests against started against this, because it led to the displacement of the indigenous people from their land. So this also created one of the issue. And the second thing is resource management. What is that this means? It means that the indigenous people had a lot of knowledge of this, have a lot of knowledge of this environment or these forests, because they are very connected with these places. Forests are their homes, so they know how to manage it. So they use sustainable management of their area, because they treat it as their home. On the different corners of the world, not only in India, a lot of tribal communities, a lot of indigenous people used to live, like 20 lakh live in Cordillera region of Philippines, 10 lakhs in Machu Picchu people of Chile, 6 lakhs tribal people of Chittagong Hill, Bangladesh, 35 lakhs in the North American people. So there are different communities in India. We know a lot of different tribes names who lives in the forest area. So they had a resource management knowledge, so they know how to live this area. So with the environmental impacts or the global warming or the climate change, even with the government intervention sometime, or we say the multinational companies intervention, impacts the life of these indigenous people. So it's also created a lot of challenge for the government to choose between the development versus the traditional rights or the traditional people's rights. So all these things were started. And the next thing is the cultural survival. So for the environmental cause, we also need to preserve the traditional indigenous culture of the area, because some of these indigenous community do a lot of things for the safeguard over their area, or they had some traditional knowledge over different things that we don't know. So these things led a lot of a new question, that we need to safeguard this traditional community for the cultural survival of the community, and this cultural survival also leads to the environmental safeguard also somehow. So that's also led to the new organization called the World Council of Indigenous People, that was formed in 1975. So on this platform of World Council of Indigenous People, there were the indigenous people from the whole world came together and talks about their rights or the different issues of the environment. So this is how we try to create a balance between the development and the interests of the indigenous people or their rights. So these are the things in this unit about the environment and how these environment become a complex issue in today era, where we need to check a balance between the different sector, or we can say a different part of a country, and how these environmental issue led a lot of convention on the different platform. So these are the things in this unit. Now come to the MCQ question. So these are the MCQ questions that had earlier came in the examination, and some of the new question also in this. So you try to solve this question from your own view. So solve this question for your better exam preparation, and you can see the NCRT also for better understanding, or if you want to study more on this issue or this topic. So this is all from my side. I hope you understand.